What if you were told that the most powerful entertainment medium in human history didn't start in Hollywood, or in a recording studio, or even in a publishing house? It started in a physics lab at Brookhaven National Laboratory in 1958 with a scientist named William Higginbotham. He built a game called Tennis for Two on an oscilloscope, just to entertain visitors at an open day. He thought nothing of it, never patented it, and simply moved on. That single moment of playful engineering would eventually give birth to a $200 billion industry that today dwarfs the global film and music industries combined. The story of how we got from that glowing green dot to the photorealistic worlds of GTA 6 is one of the most extraordinary business, cultural, and psychological stories of our time. Before we go back to the beginning, let's understand the sheer scale of what we're talking about. The global gaming industry generated over $200 billion in revenue in 2023. That is more than the global box office and the recorded music industry combined. There are 2.7 billion gamers worldwide, which is about 1 in every 3 people on the planet. The average American gamer is 31 years old, and 52% of all gamers today are women. This is not a niche hobby. This is the dominant entertainment medium of the 21st century. And yet, most business analysis still treats it as a subset of entertainment rather than the defining cultural and economic force it has become. To understand gaming, you have to understand what the world looked like before it. In the 1970s and early 1980s, American teenagers had very few third places, meaning spaces that were neither home nor school, where they could gather, compete, and form an identity. The mall was one, and the arcade was another. The arcade was unlike anything that had come before it. It was loud, neon-lit, and viscerally competitive. You didn't just play a game, you performed in front of an audience. Your initials on the high scoreboard were a form of social currency. The arcade was the first digital public square. Space Invaders, released in 1978, was the first game to become a genuine cultural phenomenon. It generated $2 billion in quarters in its first year, in $1,978, and it even caused a coin shortage in Japan. Pac-Man, released in 1980, was the first game to attract female players in significant numbers, and it became so culturally embedded that it appeared on the cover of Time magazine. And Donkey Kong introduced the world to a character called Jumpman, who would later be renamed Mario. The key insight here is this: the arcade was a public institution. It was democratic because you paid per play, which meant a kid with $1 could compete against anyone. The social dynamics were rich, complex, and deeply human. The games of this era were designed with one brutal constraint. They had to be hard enough that players kept feeding them quarters, but rewarding enough that they kept coming back. This created a very specific psychological design philosophy, which we can call the near miss. Think about it. Pac-Man's ghosts were programmed to be almost catchable. Space Invaders sped up as you killed more aliens, creating a rising sense of panic. Galaga even let you rescue your own captured ship, creating incredible moments of triumph. These were not accidents. They were the first systematic applications of behavioral psychology to entertainment design. The casino industry had been doing this for decades. Gaming borrowed the playbook and scaled it globally. This is the part that data doesn't capture. The feeling of walking into an arcade in 1983 was unlike anything else available to a teenager. There was the smell of electronics in carpet and the cacophony of sound effects from a dozen different machines. You could see the social hierarchy in who was gathered around which cabinet. And there was the physical sensation of a joystick and buttons, which was tactile, immediate, and embodied. Every single quarter felt consequential, because it was. There was no save state and no second chance. You played until you lost, and then you watched someone better than you take your place. The emotional intensity of that experience, the humiliation of failure, and the ecstasy of a new high score was something entirely new in human entertainment. It created a generation of people who were, for the first time, emotionally invested in digital worlds. Then something happened that fundamentally changed the nature of gaming. Nintendo moved it into the home. The Nintendo Entertainment System, launched in the US in 1985 after the great video game crash of 1983, did something brilliant. It rebranded gaming as a family-friendly living room activity. The NES was even packaged with a robot called ROB and a light gun game called Duck Hunt. This was done specifically to make it look like a toy, not a game console, so that retailers who had been burned by the Atari crash would stock it. By 1990, 30% of American households had an NES. For context, only 23% had a personal computer. Gaming had beaten the PC into the American home, and the experience was fundamentally different from the arcade. You played alone or with a sibling in the privacy of your living room. The social performance of the arcade was replaced by something more intimate and more personal. The games reflected this shift. Super Mario Bros. Was not just a game, it was a world. The Legend of Zelda was not just a challenge, it was an adventure. For the first time, games had narrative, atmosphere, and emotional stakes beyond just the high score. Super Mario Bros. Sold 40 million copies, defining a generation. The Legend of Zelda introduced the concept of open-world exploration to an entire generation of players. Tetris, which was the Game Boy's killer app, was created by a Soviet programmer named Alexei Pajitnov. It became the first major game to cross the Iron Curtain, becoming a symbol of the universal human love of puzzle solving. Street Fighter II and Mortal Kombat brought the arcade fighting game home. Mortal Kombat's graphic violence triggered the first major political debate about gaming content, leading directly to the creation of the ESRB rating system in 1994. And the console wars between Nintendo and Sega, essentially Mario versus Sonic, were the first major platform battles in gaming history. They established a pattern of competition that continues to this day. While consoles dominated the living room, something different was happening on personal computers. The internet arrived, and gaming was never the same again. The PC gaming revolution of the 1990s and early 2000s was not just about better graphics or more complex games. It was about connectivity. For the first time, you could play against strangers anywhere in the world. And this created something entirely new: the digital tribe. World of Warcraft, at its peak, had 12 million subscribers paying $15 a month. Players formed guilds, which were organizations with hierarchies, rules, and cultures as complex as any real-world institution. People fell in love in WoW, and people got divorced over WoW. The South Korean government even declared it a national emergency when teenagers began dying from exhaustion at internet cafes after multi-day gaming sessions. This was not entertainment anymore. This was a parallel society. The games of this era deserve individual attention. Doom, released in 1993, was so culturally significant that in its first year, it was installed on more computers than Windows 95. It pioneered the first-person shooter genre and introduced the concept of user-generated content through its modding community. Then you had Age of Empires, released in 1997, which introduced millions of players to real-time strategy and historical simulation, and is still played competitively today. Remarkably, Roller Coaster Tycoon was written almost entirely by a single programmer named Chris Sawyer in assembly language, one of the most technically demanding programming languages, and it became the best-selling PC game of 1999. Going back a bit, Prince of Persia, created by Jordan Mechner in 1989, used rotoscoped animation tracing over film footage of real human movement to create the most realistic game character motion ever seen at the time. And even earlier games like Dangerous Dave, created by John Romero before he made Doom, proved that a single talented developer could create a compelling commercial product. While all of this was happening, a quiet revolution was taking place in pockets and backpacks. The Game Boy, launched in 1989, proved that people would sacrifice graphical quality for portability. Its monochrome green screen and simple controls were technically inferior to every home console, and yet it outsold them all. Tetris on Game Boy sold 35 million copies. But the most significant moment in handheld gaming history was not on a dedicated gaming device. It was on a phone. In 1997, a Nokia engineer named Taneli Armanto wrote a game called Snake and pre-installed it on the Nokia 6110. Within a few years, Snake was on hundreds of millions of phones worldwide. It was the first game that billions of people played, not because they sought it out, but because it was simply there. Snake is the true ancestor of mobile gaming. In a similar way, Solitaire, which was pre-installed on Windows 3.0 in 1990, did the same thing for office workers, introducing an entire generation of adults to casual digital gaming during their lunch breaks. Then the iPhone arrived, and everything changed. Steve Jobs famously did not want games on the iPhone, thinking they would cheapen the device. It was overruled by the App Store's success, and the gaming industry was never the same again. The casual gaming explosion from 2007 to 2015 is one of the most dramatic demographic shifts in entertainment history. Angry Birds, released in 2009, was downloaded 3 billion times. But the more revealing story is FarmVille. The average FarmVille player was a 43-year-old woman. She was not a teenage boy or a college student, but a middle-aged woman who had never considered herself a gamer. Gaming had finally escaped its demographic ghetto. The business model that made this possible was not selling games, it was selling time. The freemium model, pioneered by social gaming companies like Zynga, was borrowed directly from casino psychology. You played for free, but you paid to skip waiting, you paid to keep playing, and you paid to win. Candy Crush Saga, released in 2012, generated $1 billion in revenue in its first year, all from a free game. The psychological mechanisms it used were sophisticated and deliberate. It used variable reward schedules, the same mechanism used in slot machines. It applied social pressure through Facebook integration, created artificial scarcity through the live system, and exploited the sunk cost fallacy through its near-miss mechanic. These were not accidents. King, the company behind Candy Crush, employed behavioral psychologists on its design team. Wordle, by contrast, became a viral phenomenon in 2021 precisely because it rejected all of these mechanisms. It was free, had no monetization, and could only be played once a day. Its viral spread was driven by the sharing of results, creating a daily ritual of collective participation that felt genuinely communal. It was later acquired by the New York Times for a reported 7-figure sum. While casual gaming was democratizing the audience, something else was happening at the other end of the spectrum. Competitive gaming was professionalizing. The first major esports tournament was the Red Annihilation Quake Tournament in 1997, with a prize of a Ferrari. By 2019, the League of Legends World Championship had 73 million viewers, which is more than the Super Bowl. And Twitch, launched in 2011, created an entirely new category of entertainment, watching other people play games. This sounds absurd until you understand the psychology behind it. Twitch is not really about games, it is about parasocial relationships. Viewers don't watch Ninja because they want to learn how to play Fortnite. They watch Ninja because Ninja is entertaining, relatable, and present in their lives in a way that traditional celebrities are not. Twitch is the logical endpoint of reality television, being unscripted, unedited, and intimate. The professionalization of esports has been remarkable. South Korean player Lee Sang-hyuk, known as Faker, is considered the greatest League of Legends player of all time. He has won the World Championship 4 times, has a dedicated fan base of millions, and earns more than most professional athletes in traditional sports. The Dota 2 International Tournament has offered prize pools exceeding $40 million, funded entirely by player purchases of in-game cosmetics. Esports athletes train 12 or more hours daily, work with sports psychologists, nutritionists, and physical trainers, and often retire in their mid-20s due to the physical demands of competitive gaming. Universities now offer esports scholarships, and the U.S. government has granted esports players the same visa status as professional athletes. This is not a hobby, this is a sport. The story of gaming monetization is, in many ways, the story of an industry that discovered it could make more money by not selling games. The shift from premium models, where you pay once, to freemium models, where you can pay forever, was the most significant business model transformation in entertainment history. Loot boxes, which are randomized in-game reward systems, were classified as gambling by Belgium in 2018 and banned. The UK Gambling Commission investigated them, and the US FTC held hearings on them, and yet they continue to generate billions of dollars annually. Battle passes, pioneered by Fortnite, are a more elegant solution. They are a seasonal subscription that rewards engagement rather than just spending, and they generate 30 to 60% of free-to-play game revenues. The crypto gaming experiment of 2021 to 2022 attempted to take this further, creating games where players could earn real cryptocurrency. Axie Infinity, the flagship play-to-earn game, briefly created a genuine economy in the Philippines, where players were earning more from the game than from their day jobs. Then, the token collapsed 98%, and 93% of blockchain games shut down within their first year. The lesson was clear. Players will accept monetization, but they will not accept being treated as liquidity. Roblox is not a game. It is a platform for creating games, and it is primarily used by children aged 9 to 18. But here is what makes it extraordinary. Roblox has paid out $1.5 billion to its creators, many of whom are teenagers. A 17-year-old developer named Alex Balfans co-created a game called Jailbreak on Roblox that has been played over 7 billion times and has earned him millions of dollars. Minecraft, with 300 million copies sold, is the best-selling video game of all time. Its genius was the absence of goals. It gave players a world and said, "Do whatever you want." This was a profound philosophical statement about the nature of play. Fortnite's cosmetic economy, where players spend real money on purely aesthetic items with no gameplay impact, generates billions of dollars annually. This has proven that players will pay for identity expression even when there is no competitive advantage. Finally, Pokémon Go took gaming into the physical world through augmented reality, briefly making people walk into traffic, trespass on private property, and gather in public spaces in numbers not seen since the arcade era. We are approaching a moment that philosophers and scientists are beginning to take seriously. The point at which virtual environments become indistinguishable from physical reality. GTA 6, the most anticipated game in history, features a map so large and detailed that it includes dynamic weather systems, realistic crowd behavior, and environmental storytelling at a level of complexity that rivals real cities. The game's photorealism is so advanced that screenshots have been mistaken for photographs. Unreal Engine 5, the technology platform underlying many modern games, is now used not just for games but for film production, architectural visualization, and military simulation. The line between a game engine and a reality engine has dissolved. This raises a question that philosopher Nick Bostrom posed in 2003, and that has only become more urgent since. If it is possible to create a simulation indistinguishable from reality, and if advanced civilizations would have the incentive to create many such simulations, then statistically we are almost certainly living in one. The most important business story in gaming is not about any individual game or company. It is about who controls the infrastructure through which games are distributed and monetized. Steam, Valve's PC gaming platform, controls approximately 75% of the PC gaming market and takes a 30% commission on every transaction. Epic Games, backed by Tencent, launched its own store with a 12% commission specifically to challenge Steam's dominance. Apple's App Store and Google's Play Store each take 30% of all mobile game revenue. Since mobile gaming is the largest gaming segment by revenue, this means Apple and Google are the largest gaming companies in the world by revenue extraction, despite making almost no games themselves. The battle between Epic Games and Apple over App Store fees went to court and revealed for the first time the internal economics of these platforms. The 30% commission standard is the most consequential pricing decision in entertainment history. Most people in the West have never heard of Tencent. This is remarkable because Tencent is the world's largest gaming company by revenue. It owns 100% of Riot Games, the maker of League of Legends. It owns 40% of Epic Games, the maker of Fortnite. It owns 84% of Supercell, the maker of Clash of Clans. It also has significant stakes in Activision Blizzard, Ubisoft, Snap, and dozens of other companies. PUBG Mobile, one of the most downloaded games in history with 67 million monthly active users, is published by Tencent's subsidiary Krafton. The Chinese government's relationship with Tencent is complex and consequential. It has imposed strict limits on how many hours Chinese children can play games per week, and it has the power to deny game approvals, which it has used as a regulatory weapon. The rise of Chinese gaming is not just a business story. It is a geopolitical story about the future of digital culture. No honest account of gaming's evolution can ignore its dark side. The World Health Organization formally recognized internet gaming disorder as a clinical condition in 2018. Studies have shown that excessive gaming produces neurological changes similar to substance addiction, affecting the same dopamine pathways and causing the same withdrawal symptoms and escalating tolerance. The Blue Whale Challenge, which emerged in Russia around 2016, was a social media phenomenon that exploited gaming psychology using daily challenges, escalating commitment, and community belonging to manipulate vulnerable teenagers into self-harm. It was reported to have been linked to over 130 deaths worldwide, though the numbers are disputed. Toxic communities, characterized by harassment, racism, and misogyny, have been endemic in online gaming since its earliest days. The anonymity of online interaction has consistently amplified the worst of human behavior. These are not peripheral issues. They are structural consequences of design choices made by companies that prioritized engagement over well-being. The future of gaming is not a single technology or a single platform. It is the dissolution of the boundary between game and life. Theme parks based on games, like Nintendo World at Universal Studios, are bringing virtual worlds into physical space. OTT platforms are creating games based on their intellectual property, and vice versa. AI is enabling the creation of games by individuals with no programming knowledge, completing the democratization of game creation that Roblox began. VR and AR markets are projected to reach $300 billion by 2030. And the metaverse, whatever form it ultimately takes, will be built on the infrastructure, the design principles, and the business models that gaming has developed over 50 years. The companies that control gaming today are positioning themselves to control the next iteration of human reality. 50 years ago, a physicist built a game to entertain visitors at an open day. He had no idea what he had started. Today, gaming is the dominant entertainment medium on Earth. It has shaped culture, psychology, economics, and geopolitics. It has created new forms of community and new forms of addiction. It has democratized creativity and concentrated power. It has made billionaires and destroyed lives. It has asked us, for the first time in human history, to seriously consider whether the reality we inhabit is itself a kind of game. The story of gaming is the story of the 21st century, and the game is far from over. Subscribe to Business Undercurrent for weekly deep dives into the forces shaping business, technology, and culture.